If you have $4.2 million sitting in your investment accounts right now, according to one major study, you have technically reached the peak of human happiness. That's not an exaggerated headline. Researchers tracking more than 20,000 Americans over the age of 50 found that once people crossed that $4 million line, their reported life satisfaction stopped climbing. It just flattened out. For most of us watching that number scroll past on a screen, $4 million doesn't feel inspiring. It feels crushing. If your retirement accounts show $800,000 or even $1.2 million, that kind of headline can make you feel like you showed up late to a race everyone else already finished. 95% of Americans will never see that number in their own accounts, and yet it gets treated like the finish line for a happy retirement. But there's a detail the research quietly leaves out. That $4 million figure is an average, and averages blur people together who have nothing in common. It blends a retired executive in Manhattan with someone who owns a paid-off house in rural Ohio. It blends a person with zero pension income with someone collecting a guaranteed $4,000 a month from a government pension. An average like that doesn't describe anyone specific. It describes nobody. I've sat with people who felt like financial failures because of a number that was never built for their life. That reaction is common, and it is not a sign that you did something wrong. In the next few minutes, I want to walk you through what some researchers call a saturation framework, the point where more money in your accounts stops buying more happiness. Your personal version of that number might be $1.5 million. It might be $800,000. And chasing one more dollar past that point can actually leave you worse off, not better. If you're tired of watching the goalposts move every time a new headline drops, and you would rather know the number that actually applies to your life, stick around. And if that sounds useful, consider subscribing, because we build plans around real people here, not statistical averages. The saturation point is the moment where an extra dollar in your accounts stops making you any happier. Researchers call it the point where the marginal utility of wealth hits zero. For a retired couple in a lower-cost state like Ohio, with $3,000 a month coming in from Social Security, that point often lands around $1.1 million, not $4 million. Have you ever actually run that math for your own household? Or did you just adopt a stranger's number because it was the loudest one in the room? Most people never do the first version. They just carry the second one around like a verdict. Underneath the saturation point sits something researchers call the identity protection line. That's the dollar amount where three things are covered at once. Your basic needs are met, so you're not lying awake worrying about bills. You have the freedom to make choices, like retiring on your own timeline instead of somebody else's. And your sense of who you are, the version of yourself that provided for a family and built something real, stays intact. Once those three are covered, more money in the account starts doing less and less work in your actual life. This is where people get stuck. Most retirees confuse their survival number with their saturation number, and that mix-up is exactly what fuels the just one more year trap. The survival number is simple arithmetic. Take your annual expenses, subtract your guaranteed income from Social Security or a pension, and divide what's left by 0.04. That gives you roughly the portfolio size needed to safely cover the gap. Say your expenses run $70,000 a year, and Social Security covers $30,000 of that. The gap is $40,000. Divide by 0.04, and you land on a $1 million portfolio to cover survival. The saturation number adds a buffer on top usually around 30%, for the parts of retirement that make it enjoyable rather than just sustainable. That pushes the same couple to roughly $1.3 million. Still nowhere near $4 million. There's a trade-off hiding underneath all of this, too. Every extra year spent chasing a number past your own saturation point is a year of health, energy, and time with people you love that doesn't come back, traded for money that has already stopped making you any happier. There's a piece of good news buried in the 2026 numbers as well. Social Security's cost of living adjustment for 2026 came in at 2.8%. That might sound small, but it means your guaranteed income stretches a little further against the same expenses, which quietly lowers the portfolio size you actually need. The $4 million headline is louder than your survival number will ever be, because drama travels further than accuracy. But your number is the one that decides whether you actually sleep well at night, and it's the one we're about to build in detail. Finding your real number comes down to 3 adjustments, and none of them require a spreadsheet you don't already understand. The first is geography. A $2 million portfolio in San Francisco buys roughly the same lifestyle, the same margin of safety, the same freedom to make choices as $950,000 does in Knoxville, Tennessee. Housing costs, property taxes, and everyday prices swing that much between regions. If you're comparing your accounts to a national average number, you're really comparing your specific zip code to a blend of the most expensive cities in the country. The second adjustment is your income floor, and this one changed in a way most retirement content hasn't caught up with yet. The Social Security Fairness Act repealed the windfall elimination provision and the government pension offset for benefits paid after December 2023. If you spent years as a teacher, firefighter, or other government employee and assumed your Social Security would be reduced because of a pension, that reduction is gone now. For a lot of former public employees, that repeal effectively raises guaranteed income enough to lower the portfolio they need by up to $300,000. The third adjustment is a health buffer, which we'll get into more in a moment, but it belongs in this framework because unexpected medical costs are exactly the kind of thing that makes people cling to the $4 million number out of fear rather than math. I used to tell clients that $2 million was the safe minimum for retirement, full stop. I was wrong about that. I've watched people with $5 million who are miserable, checking their portfolio every time the market dips 10%, because their entire identity got tied to a number instead of a life. And I've watched people with $700,000 who are genuinely living their best years because their income floor from Social Security and a pension is solid enough that market swings barely register for them. Ask yourself honestly which category you fall into. Is most of your retirement income guaranteed to arrive whether the market is up or down, or does nearly all of it depend on selling investments at whatever price they happen to be trading at that month? That single answer tells you more about your real comfort level than any total balance on a statement ever could. There's a cost to getting this wrong, too. Assume your real number is $4 million, when your actual saturation point is closer to $1.3 million, and you might trade 5 or 10 extra working years you can't get back, for a cushion your own framework never actually required. Look at 2 versions of the same retirement. Couple A has $4 million, sitting in a $401,000, no pension, and Social Security covering maybe $3,500 a month combined. Couple B has $1.2 million invested, plus $5,000 a month combined from pensions and Social Security. On paper, Couple A looks far ahead. In practice, Couple B often reports higher day-to-day satisfaction because that guaranteed $5,000 arriving every month acts like a license to spend without checking the market first. Couple A has to sell shares to generate the same spending money, which turns every withdrawal into a small negotiation with a number that moves daily. That's the real shift here. It's not just how much you've accumulated. It's how much of your spending is guaranteed versus how much depends on market timing you don't control. Once you know your adjusted number, geography included, income floor included, health buffer included, you can stop measuring yourself against $4 million and start measuring yourself against your own life. There's a variable the $4 million headline completely ignores, and it's the one that quietly wrecks more retirement plans than a bad market year ever does: long-term care. Have you ever actually priced out what a year of memory care or a nursing home would cost in your own state? Or are you just hoping it won't happen to you? According to the Care Scout Cost of Care Survey, the national average cost of a private room in a nursing home now runs about $129,575 a year. That's not a rare worst-case scenario. That's the average. A single extended stay can pull 6 figures out of a portfolio in a matter of months. And it doesn't ask permission first. That number matters more than it looks on the surface, and there's a reason why. A health crisis doesn't happen on a schedule you control, and it doesn't care whether the market is up or down when it hits. Go back to 2008. Retirees who had built a separate liquid health buffer into their plan didn't have to sell a home or dump stocks at the bottom of a crash just to cover a parent's care or their own medical bills. The ones without that buffer often did, locking in losses at the worst possible moment. This is part of why the $4 million number feels so seductive to begin with. For a lot of people chasing it, it isn't really about lifestyle. It's fear, a vague sense that more will somehow cover whatever medical curveball shows up later. A health buffer built deliberately into your saturation number does that job far more efficiently than an arbitrary extra few million sitting in the market and hoping it's enough. There's a practical step worth taking here, too. For 2026, the additional senior deduction from the One Big Beautiful Bill Act allows people 65 and older to shield $6,000 of income from taxes if you're single, or $12,000 if you're married, and both spouses qualify, phasing out above $75,000 in income for a single filer or $150,000 for a married couple. That's not the same as Social Security becoming tax-free. It's a separate deduction stacked on top of your existing ones. But it's real money the IRS is effectively handing back to help fund exactly this kind of buffer. Once you've added a real health buffer instead of a vague sense of dread, your saturation number stops feeling like a guess and starts feeling like a plan you can actually defend. Let's put this framework next to 2 real patterns I've watched play out again and again. Using 2 people I'll call Jim and Sarah. Jim decided early on that $4 million was the target. At 64, he's still working a job that drains him, telling himself he's almost there. Every year he delays, the number in his head creeps up a little further, because inflation and lifestyle creep keep nudging the target away from him. Sarah, on the other hand, ran her own saturation number. She stopped working at 60 with $1.5 million invested, a paid-off house, and Social Security covering her basic bills. Her plan includes a 30% lifestyle buffer built on top of her survival number, plus a health buffer set aside separately. Then the same shock hits both of them, a 20% market correction, the kind we saw in 2022, wipes a chunk off both portfolios overnight. Jim is devastated. His $4 million target just became a $3.2 million reality. And because his sense of security, even his sense of who he is, was built entirely around hitting that peak number, watching it drop feels like watching his identity take the hit alongside his portfolio. Sarah barely flinches. Her $1.5 million dropped too, but her guaranteed income never moved, her bills never moved, and her plan already accounted for swings exactly like this one. Her autonomy, her ability to keep making her own choices, isn't threatened by one bad quarter. That's the identity protection line doing its job in real time. It's not that Sarah has more money than Jim. She almost certainly has less. It's that her number was built around what actually keeps a life stable, guaranteed income, a spending buffer, and a health cushion instead of a single dramatic figure borrowed from a study about people she's never met. Ask yourself which version of this story feels closer to your own plan right now. Is your sense of security tied to hitting one specific peak number, or is it tied to a floor of guaranteed income that holds steady no matter what the market does this quarter? Jim's story isn't a failure story, and that's worth saying clearly. He did everything he was told to do. He saved aggressively and delayed spending for years. The problem was never his effort or his discipline. It was that nobody ever showed him how to calculate a number that was actually his own. Even after you calculate your real number, there's usually one more obstacle left, and it's not math. It's a feeling. Psychologists call it loss aversion. Spending $1,000 in retirement can feel like losing a piece of your safety net, even when your accounts show $2 million sitting there. Your brain doesn't weigh a dollar spent and a dollar saved the same way. Losing money registers as roughly twice as painful as gaining the same amount feels good, and 40 years of disciplined saving trains that reflects deep. That's not a character flaw. It's basic behavioral economics, and once you can name it, it gets much easier to work around it deliberately instead of white-knuckling through every withdrawal. If you feel a flash of guilt buying something you can clearly afford, that doesn't mean you're bad at retirement. It means you're a well-trained saver, and your brain is doing exactly what it was built to do for 40 years straight. That instinct kept you saving through recessions, kept you contributing when it would have been easier not to. It doesn't just switch off the day you stop working. This is a small shift that helps more than most spreadsheets do. Stop staring at your total balance every time you want to spend money, because a shrinking number will always trigger that same alarm regardless of how large it still is. Instead, set up an automated transfer from your brokerage account to your checking account on the first of each month. Call it your retirement salary. That single change moves the decision out of your emotional brain and into a routine one. You're not asking yourself, should I touch my life savings? Every time you want to replace an old mattress or take a trip to see your grandkids. You're just spending your paycheck, the same way you did for 40 years, except now the paycheck comes from a portfolio instead of an employer. I've watched people who saved diligently for decades still hesitate over a $60 dinner, not because they couldn't afford it, but because nobody ever gave them permission to treat their savings like income, instead of a fortress to defend. So where does that leave the $4 million number? Nowhere useful, honestly. You don't need $4 million to feel secure. You need to know your own number and to actually believe it once you've calculated it. Happiness in retirement was never really about the size of the pile. It comes from the gap between what you're guaranteed every month and what your actual life costs to run. Once your survival number is covered, your saturation number accounted for, and your health buffer in place, every extra hour you spend working for more is an hour of time you're trading away that you can never buy back. That's not a guilt trip. It's just the math, laid out plainly, the same way we laid out everything else here today. Think back through everything we just covered. Your survival number told you the floor. Your saturation number added the buffer that makes life worth living, not just affordable. Geography, your income floor, and a real health buffer adjusted that number until it actually matched your life instead of a national study. If you'd rather build a retirement around freedom than around chasing a bigger pile of cash that stopped adding to your happiness a while ago, stick around and subscribe. We'll keep breaking down the real numbers behind the headlines, the ones built for actual people instead of statistical averages. You've done the hard work of saving for decades. Now comes the braver part. Living like the number you calculated is actually enough, because for most people watching this, it already is.